So how does Dylan's New Nightmare fit into the continuity of the original Freddy universe? Well, being a sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare, I'll tell you. If you recall, all throughout Wes Craven's New Nightmare, Heather Langenkamp is seemingly driven more and more insane throughout the progression of the film as her son Dylan falls deeper and deeper into being the victim of Freddy Krueger, now trying to cross over into our world. Of course, in the movie, the best way for Freddy to do so ends up being through Dylan. So, what that means for Heather is that she has to find a way to pull Dylan back and rescue him from Freddy before it's too late, and before Freddy completely crosses over into our world. Towards the end of the film, after a sleepwalking incident turns into a violent fit, Heather ends up taking Dylan to the hospital to be looked at. Now, while the nurses are looking over Dylan, the doctor is actually sort of interrogating Heather, finding out what might be causing the issues. She asks what Dylan's been doing, what sort of behavior he's been exhibiting, and Heather mentions that he's been acting strange, he's been acting like Freddy. And it kind of comes out in a slip, and the doctor says, "Freddy Krueger, the man from your films?" And she says yes, but originally she had told the doctor that Dylan hadn't seen those films. So this whole thing is looking suspicious, more and more suspicious to the doctor. And while this is going on, Dylan, they've determined, is just sleep deprived. And the nurses suspect that Heather is not allowing him to actually go to sleep. So they determine that there's a good plan of action while Heather is being interrogated. Then what they're going to do is sort of trick Dylan's babysitter, Julie, into sedating him. And of course, it's one of the best scenes in New Nightmare when they actually they trick Julie and then they sedate him behind her back, and then she punches the nurse that tricked her and scares the other one away using the hypodermic needle the other one filled. It's a great scene, but what ends up happening is Dylan falls asleep sitting there on the table, and Freddy emerges and kills Julie in reality. While Dylan is asleep, it's allowed him to sort of slip into our reality, unseen to everyone but Dylan, as he kills Julie and drags her across the ceiling, just like Tina in part 1. So a great homage and a great moment in New Nightmare. So after that, Dylan just freaks out and turns around and cries out, "Rex!" because he thinks the reason Freddy has been able to emerge is because Rex isn't there to fight him off. So he takes off, and then suddenly, while Heather is, done being interrogated, she stands up and refuses and says, "I'm getting Dylan out of here right now." And the doctor basically has to let her go. And then the nurse rushes in and they hear commotion, and that's when Julie's getting killed. So they rush over, but by the time they get there, Julie is dead on the ground and Dylan has disappeared. And Heather tells the doctor, "He's fully capable of walking out of here. He sleepwalks, you idiot." And then she rushes out of the hospital because she knows that he's going to be walking across a freeway. So she rushes out of the hospital before she can explain anything. The doctors still think that she's blaming Freddy, but they don't have enough of a reason to hold her. But now the child has disappeared, and now the mom has disappeared, so they've just been left in the dust. Then the rest of the movie happens, right? So Heather follows his trail of breadcrumbs leading to his bed, where she takes his sleeping pills in order to be able to join him in order to fight Freddy. The entity that has taken the form of Freddy, I should say. So they go down, they defeat Freddy, and they lock him into the fire pit, just like the witch in Hansel and Gretel. And then Freddy essentially explodes, and his lair starts to come apart, and they dive into the water and basically fall back into our reality. So what happens after that point is, of course, they roll out of the bed and they see the script, the completed New Nightmare script, and Heather picks it up. Dylan asks, "Is it a story?" She says, "Yes, it's a story." He says, "Read me some." And then she starts reading the script as the camera pulls back and fades to black and the credits start rolling. So Dylan's New Nightmare, getting back to it, how does it fit into the continuity? Well, it takes place 25 years later. I'm not going to explain the story itself, but I am going to say that the story so far is thus. After New Nightmare, at the very end, because of what happened with Heather at the hospital, the doctors were still very concerned about Dylan's well-being, so they contacted the police, and they sent the police to Heather's home. And even though Heather and Dylan finished their story against Freddy, what we didn't see is that right after the camera is pulling back and it fades to black and they continue the story, but it cuts to credits, my idea is that after that they hear this. Open up, it's the police! And they're knocking Pops over and everything, just like that. So Heather goes and opens the door, and the police barge in and are like, what's going on, where's Dylan? And even though Dylan is okay, he's obviously got even further signs of distress. He's got, scorch marks from the Freddy explosion behind him, and he does not look like a happy and healthy child, and Heather's only explanation is Freddy. So as a result of that, she gets sent off to the nut house, because if you recall, when she's talking to someone in New Nightmare, I think it's the doctor. No, I think she's talking to Julie, but in any case, she says that her family has a history of mental illness, and her greatest fear is ending up in an asylum.
It's in my family,
What is?
A very close relative died in an institution.
Really?
So the precedent is set. So she is sent off to the asylum, and because she continues to blame Freddy, and she has no other excuse other than that. So Dylan is sent into the foster care system for the next however many years, until about 10 years, until he's a full-grown adult. And so we actually pick up with him 25 years after the end of New Nightmare, where he is now just over 30, and he is trying to operate his life in LA the way that both of his parents did. If you recall, obviously Heather was an actress in Hollywood, and his dad, Chase Porter, worked on the set of Wes Craven's New Nightmare movie, designing the glove before he was killed in this movie. So Dylan has precedence to try and make it in Hollywood. It's kind of what he knows. It's what he was raised around. So that's what he's trying to do. What we didn't see immediately after Freddy exploded, though, was that the essence of Freddy ended up flying itself into Dylan's head right before they escaped back into the real world. So what's happened is Freddy's essence, or the evil entity that likes the form of Freddy's essence, has been sort of hibernating in Dylan's brain all these years, sort of gathering strength based on all of the nightmares that he's had over the course of those 25 years. And when we pick it up, Freddy has now gained enough strength to start to be able to affect things again. And that is where our story begins. So that is the whole backstory to Dylan's New Nightmare, and how it ties in as a direct sequel to Wes Craven's New Nightmare. Again, I'm not going to tell you what the actual story is. You're going to have to watch it yourself once it's all ready. But that is how it all is going to come together. Thank you guys very much. Now, towards the end of the film, Nancy follows Dylan back to the house, follows his trail of bread